All right, John, after the mammoth that was the Nintendo 64 lineup, I decided to take it easy by going to the DOS, but we're not exactly the most familiar with the DOS format, so we've got a guest this time. Welcome to TBSkyen. How you doing? And welcome to being our a DOS expert, as it were.
Yeah, expert. I shall do my level best. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Glad to have you on. So what is all of our experience with DOS before we get into what the top 10 ended up being?
I mean, yeah, for me, DOS was like the first platform I really gamed on. We had like an NES in the after school club, and my brother had an SNES at some point that I sometimes stole time on. But DOS was like, I had my first computer because my dad had an office job that kept giving him new computers. So I got his old computer, started finding DOS games, sharewaring, things like that. So that was my gaming beginning. Is like I started out very much as a PC gamer and graduated to consoles later. So I have a lot of affection for the olden DOS games and the old publishers and the chaos and the Wild West that used to be that platform.
I grew up with Windows really. It's like 95 and 98 were my first two Windows platforms. I got back into DOS games more through the legacy side. So I'd play like DOS emulators or on Steam, they have like the DOS box. You can play like Doom and all that. I remember my school had a bunch of DOS computers, and there were a bunch of like education games, edutainment games. There was like Math Blaster and a few things like that. So I played a bunch through that, but yeah, in its actual time, I don't think I played that many DOS games.
I'm very much in the same situation as John. I was very much a console gamer. It was just the easiest thing. We had an old Tandy computer at one point, but all I remember is these old like the discs that had like arcade games. Like I played Frogger that way. But I do distinctly remember visiting my cousins once and them having a computer where they showed off Wolfenstein 3D. And I saw that for the first time. I was like, wow. And then it was like, wow, that's way more violent than anything I saw on NES.
Yeah.
What the heck is this thing? But also like John had the educational games in school where we had the Math Blasters, we had Oregon Trail, we had for some reason Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which frustrated the hell out of me because I knew the movie, couldn't figure out the damn puzzles.
No, God, like the logic on those old LucasArts, the point click adventures was legendarily convoluted.
Yeah.
My friends and I would work together. Like we'd get in there. It was like, okay, how are we got to figure this out. There has to be a way to do this. And we could never do it. We never got beyond the giant library in the movie, just to have a sense of that. But
yeah, the interesting thing about DOS games is I remember like that because my mom worked an office job, my dad worked an office job. Like my mom and all of her colleagues at like who secretaries at an art school, they were all playing Myst back in the day, right?
Oh, yeah.
And like there used to be like a really robust ecosystem of games for people who just were not gamers, right? Like games that were more like interactive experiences. Myst, I would argue, is like a predecessor to the modern walking simulator, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And like, so there used to be ecosystems of both like Doom and Wolfenstein and all the shooty bang bang violent stuff for kids, and then very cerebral thinky games and little office toy games like The Incredible Machine. So there was like a huge diversity of programs available for the DOS in a way that there just kind of wasn't for any of the consoles back then. Like the consoles were much more like, you get a Nintendo, you get yourself some platformers and some bleep shoot 'em ups, right? But DOS being a personal computer platform, very huge range of just diversity in the lineup, which is why I'm so interested in it coming on this particular video, because like, what the heck kind of games did everybody know and play? I can figure Doom is in here somewhere, but beyond that, it's like, is Zork going to be on this list?
Right, exactly. Like on consoles, everyone on Nintendo played Mario, everyone on Sega played Sonic, but on DOS, I think Doom might be the closest thing to a DOS Mario. Like there isn't really that one thing that everybody played.
It's worth noting, as far as stats wise, I'm actually impressed with how much of a turnout there was for this. I wasn't expecting a whole lot, to be honest, but we did manage to get 200 votes, which was more than the Sega Saturn.
Oh, wow.
And a massive variety, much more variety than almost anything. 350 different games listed out on this, which is the only thing higher than it was when we covered the PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
Like, that is how comparable it is as far as memorable games, and they run the gamut. There are so many on here that I've never heard of in my life, but I'm also not a PC player. And it should be noted that DOS is distinctly different than the 80s PC stuff that we covered previously, that got bundled in with Atari 2600, because this was, as Skyen explained to us before that we started, DOS was kind of a unifier, especially thanks to Windows.
Yeah, with like Microsoft put DOS on all of their machines. Like, this is something that was new back then. It used to be you bought a computer, and like usually the manufacturer would have an OS for you if you wanted it, but people would install their own OSs and their own custom things for whatever they were doing. Like, if this is an office computer, there's probably an OS that's developed for that. If you're doing any kind of other kind of work, like if you're doing work at a shop or something where you have to do spreadsheets, probably there's an OS for that. Microsoft, one of their big innovations was inventing these operating systems that they just included as standard on their computer, and you were locked into that stuff, right? Like IBM PCs became like a platform in themselves because they had this locked-in operating system, something Apple also did. But in ye olden days, it used to be a Wild West. Like, it used to be there was as many OSs as there were manufacturers, basically. And programs were developed for everything, and like cross-ported dozens and dozens of times to various different things. So it was a very complicated landscape. It's not like the locked down gardens of the consoles where you can have a central manufacturer who like has quality control and power over who gets in the same way that Nintendo does these days.
Yeah. But it's also more open in that way, because I have played the Mega Man DOS games now, and that was developed by basically one dude, but also officially licensed by Capcom. It's like, okay, we want a DOS version, maybe get it, PC players interested in this Mega Man character. You do it. You'll be fine.
Yeah, and like id Software, like part of like the reason why Doom exists is because Carmack and Romero tried to make a port of a Mario game for PC and send it to Nintendo, and Nintendo said, nope, we don't want that. But they were so enamored with game development that that's part of the reason why they ended up going into that business. So the lineage of id Software even leads back to like these Wild West projects with Nintendo, where back then programmers could just do, we're going to remake your game and send it to you, and like, that's our business pitch.
It's funny you mentioned Mario, because DOS did get a Mario game with Mario Teaches Typing. Is that what it was called?
I think a few Mario games, according to this. I think Mario's missing, and all those went there as well.
And Sonic went to PC as well in that time. There were PC ports of Sonic. There's also like Sonic's Schoolhouse. So
3D Blast came to PC, I remember.
Exactly. So like those big console manufacturers were already sort of treating PC as like the Wild West, even way back in the DOS ages.
Very much so. It's a fascinating history that I don't think about too often, because it was so beyond where I'm at, and it's honestly this type of PC gaming is like the rise of the Western developer in a lot of ways. Japan definitely had its own scene as well, but I associate those individual OSs, like your MSXs, your Commodore 64s, all that stuff, more with Japanese game development and what they took from, again, the American side of things, because it really does seem like the origin point of all RPGs is wizardry and Ultima.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the really fascinating things, is like so much of what we think of as the JRPG came out of a bunch of D&D nerds programming like RPG games in their basements for DOS machines and like the old, like those ancient interfaces. Exactly. That laid the groundwork for that.
Yeah.
And DOS, it should also be noted for the purposes of this video, DOS lasted for a long time. It came out in 1981, and the final update was 8.0, which was in 2000, right?
Oh,
so we're talking about like
That's
19 years of things being developed with compatibility for DOS, right?
From before the NES until like pretty much from the Atari 2600 to the release of the PlayStation 2. Was PlayStation 2 in 2000? I know Dreamcast was 99. But yeah, just to have that range of consoles all encompassed within DOS, it's crazy. So that explains why we have so many different games in this list.
And
the points are not
fast forward to today, and they're stopping Windows 7 compatibility soon, aren't they?
Yeah.
But 20 years of DOS.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But all right, well, let's go ahead and get to this top 10 and see. There's a wide range, but all I will say is that the top 10, just to give you guys more of a hint, the top 10 is all stuff I've heard of. So it is in the general knowledge.
Okay.
So it's not going to be something super obscure in the
Okay.
idea. So if you associate it with the DOS system, you'll likely find it in this list. Obviously, there's more beyond that, but this will get you, that'll at least get you pointed in the right direction. So, John Skyen, what is the number 10 game of all time for DOS?
I'll let you go first.
Yeah, no, okay. I'll step on that landmine. God, I mean, the point and click adventures have to be in here somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna say, what's famous enough? Day of the Tentacle would probably be quite low on the list, but I feel like it should be there.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a good pick. I want what I'm going to say to be way higher, but I mention it sometimes, and there are young'uns who have never heard of this franchise, and that is Lemmings, which I feel like should be super popular.
Oh yeah, geez, yeah.
But people forget about it all the time, so maybe Lemmings is on here, but low.
Okay.
Yeah, Lemmings is one of those games my mom used to play, right? So
Mhm. Both good choices. Both are wrong.
Oh,
At number 10, with 168 points, Sid Meier's Civilization 1.
okay.
I figured Civilization would be somewhere on it, but yeah, absolutely, that makes sense.
I have never played the original. I think I started Civilization with, it's just 7 just came out. So I started with 5.
Yeah.
I'd see all my friends playing it, but I was never touched Civilization in the very early days.
No. I mean, this is just a classic PC game. You think PC, you think stuff like Civ and SimCity, which may also be on here.
Yeah.
But yeah, this makes a ton of sense, and it's still going strong today. We just had Civ 7 release.
Oh yeah, and what an influential series as well. Like the 4X genre basically grows out of those kinds of games and these were games that developed specifically for computers, like where the only thing they could really do was take a little sprite and move it, right? Like there wasn't smooth scrolling, you didn't have like the capabilities of an NES. So like these were games developed for the limitations of the DOS platform, these were computers made for work, for spreadsheets, and games like Civilization were built around those limitations. It's very much a spreadsheet game. But the cool thing is, if you can play Civilization 7, you can probably figure out how to play Civilization 1. Like there is a core in there that has never changed, even since all the way back then.
Right.
I believe one of the biggest changes that eventually came for one of the later Civilization games is the early games, I think, were square based.
Yes.
And then it eventually got changed to hexagonal, which
was that
was
a
a
Civ 5,
massive shift.
I think. Like that was
I think it took a
that
while,
that took a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. It was. I remember my friends talking about it like it was a huge deal. So
It was to that crowd. It was.
And the whole thing with Gandhi, I think, was because of a programming error where they were meant to have him like really low, but it looped around to being the highest.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's unfortunately, that's an urban legend. Sid Meier, I was interviewed about it, and he said it was an urban legend. But the legend went that Gandhi started with an aggression score of 1. Then when he switches to democracy, his AI takes the aggression score down by 2, which then looped back around to 255, so he starts nuking everyone. Unfortunately, an urban legend, but a very famous one.
It's fun either way. But yeah, I Civilization seems like a pretty good choice to me. Very, very origin point for PC, so very fitting within this top 10, I'd say. But let's go ahead and move on to number 9. What is the number 9 game?
Leisure Suit Larry.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna say Jazz Jackrabbit.
Good choices, but honestly, this one surprised me because I didn't realize it came out for DOS, but if it lasted till 2000, it makes sense. At number 9, Quake with 193 points.
Yeah,
Quake.
I
Quake
guess you
came
think
out
of that as a
for
Windows
DOS.
game, don't you? But yeah, I guess it came out for DOS.
Yeah, I think it came out for DOS and 95 at the same time, but it was I think it was one of the last DOS games from like id Software was the original Quake. With like 3D accelerated graphics that like blew up people's computers and no one could actually run it. I remember. It was sort of a crisis at the time for people in my circles. It was like, can you run Quake? Like, yeah, at 10 FPS with like very slow, glitchy sound and stuff like that. But if you had a computer that could run Quake, that was like everyone crowds around. Everyone wants to play that.
It was the crisis of its day.
Very much so. Like, we were taking shooters which were very much sprite based and making 3D stuff out of it. It was radical.
That is like the big shift with Quake. It's basically Doom, but 3D, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm okay.
Yeah, it's
and
like
with
going
a
Mario 64 almost for shooters.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. It really is that kind of a moment for it. Like that really is the Mario 64 moment, because I remember distinctly that it was such a big deal. This idea of having an accelerated graphics card was like, oh my god, like that's you big spender, power user if you have a graphics card at all, right? To accelerate 3D graphics. It was a generational shift, and like it happened on DOS, right? Like it happened before Windows 95 was the most popular user interface on Earth.
Yeah, and it's still a great game today. There were recent remasters, and Quake is. It wasn't just influential because it was a graphical showcase. It is legitimately an incredible game, and still is. It still holds up so well.
I've not played the single player, but I have tried the multiplayer on Switch, and I was shocked how much I acclimated to it. I was like, first time ever playing it, and I destroyed all the people I was playing with. It was just naturally that fun.
I mean, that's
like,
part
so
of it
much
too,
of
right. It's multiplayer.
So much of the language of the FPS was invented there. Like the people playing Warzone now are playing Warzone with principles that id Software came up with for Quake multiplayer back then.
100%.
It's an incredibly influential game, even if it's not thought of as era defining as Doom was.
And this was like with the lingo of like what multi-kill, triple kill, all that stuff that was really emblematic of early FPSs. Give it that hard edge. So yeah, I was great choice. I just had no idea it was on DOS.
Same.
But yeah. Beating out Civilization by about 25 points. However, the game at number 8 only beat Quake by 4 points.
Ooh.
So, what is number 8?
I'll stick to shooters. I'm pretty sure Doom's can be way higher, but Wolfenstein 3D, perhaps.
I'll pick a shooter as well and say Duke Nukem 3D.
All right. At number 8, this is where our first adventure game comes into play with 197 points. Day of the Tentacle.
Nice.
There's Day of the Tentacle.
It was bound to be here somewhere.
Yeah.
I've not played this one. I've heard about it all the time, but I've never touched it.
It too was. There was a really good remaster where you have like the swap between original and updated graphics. Like Tim Schafer and like that whole crowd of like designers that would go on to build or who built Monkey Island and things like that. They all sort of cut their teeth with LucasArts back then on games like Day of the Tentacle. Maniac Mansion was the predecessor to it, came out on the NES as well, I believe, with some censorship. Yeah. But I remember it like that series of games, that whole crowd of games were famous because, again, it was a game that your dad could play. It was a game that your mom could play because they had a very adult sense of humor. Like they went into a lot of like pop culture references and things that flew over my head as a kid, like especially as a kid in like Northern Europe, not an American at all. But it was they had a reputation for like, this is the funny game that you can kind of quote with your friends at the office. These are jokes that are like a little bit racy, maybe a little, which was the thing you could do on the PC, right? That you couldn't do on the consoles. It had that adult edge to it a little bit, even though it is a profoundly silly game at the core of it.
Exactly. I didn't really consider like your dads and mums playing it because you're right. It's not something that requires like much technical skill, but there's a lot of actual intelligence behind it though, like figuring out what goes with what. Like you can't just click things until they work, but if you use your mind, it feels so clever when you solve a puzzle just by like working out what goes where. And I hope like this is something that carries on to younger groups. I don't know how many younger people have played like Day of the Tentacle and Monkey Island, but I hope that some go back to those.
I've heard adventure type games have been making a bit of a resurgence lately.
The cozy
games.
Sure.
Revolution has kind of brought them up as well, I think, because it's a very inherently cozy genre.
Yeah.
Because there is on phones, I believe, has for a long time been a very active market in like hidden object games, which take a lot from like the old adventure games, and like especially popular with women, which is like one of the things that means like a lot of people don't. Oh, that's not real gaming, but like they're adventure games.
No, absolutely. I know LucasArts pioneered a way of interacting with the world. I forget what the system was called. Was this the game that introduced that, or was it earlier?
I think it was called Scum or something, wasn't it?
Scum, that's it. That's right.
And I think, what was the first game where they used that? Was that Maniac Mansion? I think it might have been Maniac Mansion that was the first one to have that specific like command interface, like talk, use, talk to, pick up, like thing. I think it might have been Maniac Mansion, but like definitely Dave the Tentacle.
You're correct. It was Maniac Mansion that had, like, rather than having to actually type out all of the commands, they had it all just, here's the command, click on the thing on the, like, you click that, you click the thing on the screen, and it makes it way more manageable and able to figure, like, it clicks with you a lot more. Because I actually got the King's Quest collection on Steam.
Yes.
And played through, had to have a guide on me, but I did play through the first 2 games, and playing that original game and having to type it out, it is,
especially when they make you do it fast or die. Yeah, the King's Quest games were legendary for just being deeply unfair and irrational. You do one thing at the start of the game, 20 minutes later you find out you have lost and you can't actually win. They were legendary for their archaic.
I think that's why LucasArts tended to be a little bit more popular, just because of they didn't really have those. You can't progress beyond this point.
Yeah, LucasArts were very good at, like, often the solutions were silly and unintuitive, but it was never unfair. It was never a thing of like, oh, you did a wrong thing that we didn't tell you about 2 hours ago and now you're stuck. So like that was a difference between them and Sierra. And what you brought up with the Scum thing and typing in commands, that's also one of the things that, like, video games helped innovate in this time, was interface systems for how to interact with programs, even, because all computers started out as you have a keyboard and you have a screen. You don't have a mouse. But gaming helped popularize the mouse, like, because you needed a mouse for a lot of the very popular games. That became kind of a standard peripheral, and then that started influencing how software was even designed. So there is this interplay between the very serious business-minded spreadsheets part of the industry and the games industry, because, like, often these games were sold to office workers, right? Like, there was often stuff that's like, here's a, like, many games would have what was called a boss key, which is just a key on the keyboard. You press that and it flashes to, like, just an empty text prompt, so the boss can't tell that you're playing games on company time. That was the thing that was built into a lot of this software, right? So there's a lot of interplay between these development sides of PCs and computers as a whole.
Very cool. All right, well, let's go ahead and see what number 7 is that beat out Day of the Tentacle by 1 point.
1 point, okay.
Yeah,
1 point.
So a lot of these in the top 10 are very close, and even still pretty close. Like, because we had so many different games spread across relatively low votes compared to PS1, not a lot of high points numbers, and a lot of games really close to each other that they just barely beat each other out in a lot of cases. But yeah. What was number 7?
I don't know if this one's going to rank in the top 10.
Actually, I will give you guys a hint, just because it is tougher. You have mentioned at some point every one of the rest of the games in the top 10 in your guesses.
Okay.
Oh.
Between the two of you.
Have we? Okay.
Okay.
So it's
damn,
not
I should have paid attention to what I was saying.
Like I was about to say that.
Because Microsoft Flight
you
Sim
have mentioned it at some point. I'll put it that way.
Damn.
I'll say Wolfenstein 3D here then.
Okay.
Then I'll return to Jazz Jackrabbit just in case.
Okay. Neither of those. At number 7, SimCity 2000.
SimCity 2000.
So
yes.
Yes.
And that makes sense.
That is a landmark. I played that via Windows, but that's pretty much the only sim whatever I ever got into is SimCity 2000, and it was, you get sucked in. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
You just get sucked in making this city.
Yeah, like that. Again, one of the spreadsheet softwares, right? Like it's one of those, like, okay, here we have the interface of spreadsheets. What can we do with it? Run a city, manage a budget, balance everything. That I remember SimCity also as one of those games that, like, I saw it on, like, a coworker of my dad play it at work, right, on his computer. It's one of those games that like really sort of crossed over and became because every sim game that came after took something from SimCity, like the whole thing of the interface of having a broad view of this whole system and engineering it. Like games like Factorio, games like Satisfactory, like these modern, where the satisfaction is building this system that just works together. A lot of that comes out of like the game design of SimCity as well.
Exactly. I was thinking of guessing Microsoft Flight Sim for this spot, but I think that franchise has like evolved and evolved. To the point where like the first one is historically very cool, but like it's perhaps not like a top 10 game at this point. Whereas SimCity 2000, like they've had future SimCities, but this original one still holds up so well to the point where like you can easily still say it's the best one.
People definitely make that argument. Yeah. Certainly after what happened to that poor franchise under.
Oh yeah, I never touched a SimCity after 2000. Never touched a SimCity before 2000. And it was I had no idea it was even available on the SNES for the longest time until I started hearing about this Dr. Wright or Mr. Wright or whatever it was in that version. But I have
that famous NPC from Link's Awakening.
Yes, exactly. I have distinct memories though. Certain games on PC, my dad just mastered, and he was not a gamer at all, just never really his thing. But something about certain games just clicked with him. And when it comes to that sort of efficiency stuff, he mastered SimCity 2000. He had a city that spread across the entire length of the map, fully functional and in the futuristic stuff. So we had those massive buildings that were just like hydroponics and like towers.
Yeah, arcologies and all of it. Yeah.
Like he beat SimCity 2000 in my mind. It's like, you can't get more efficient than that. He's just did it. I'm like, how?
Yeah, and that's of a kind with like Flight Simulator, as John mentioned, is like it's one of those dad games, right? That was sort of very specifically aimed at a person who's like very into us, like Railroad Tycoon and Transport Tycoon, which I don't expect show up on this list. Are games like in that mold? And I'm also thinking of like just there's genres on DOS that I don't think would show up on the list at all, but which had these incredibly dedicated fandoms, like the Hearts of Iron games and like these grand strategy games, specifically like laser targeted at like World War II military history nerds, right? Not interesting to anyone else in the world, but to them that was like deeply addictive, deeply satisfying to like play out all these scenarios of what if the Allies had this at Dunkirk or whatever.
Right.
Like there was like these niche genres with their own entire subcultures and like like the old forum boards you could go on where they had like miles long arguments about the technical specs of this tank or that, right? That's a thing I remember on the old internet finding and stumbling across. And even getting introduced to games. Yeah.
I mean, dads love the History Channel, or used to.
Yeah, there was like, it wasn't DOS like a Gettysburg game, like a game specifically about playing out the Battle of Gettysburg 100 million different ways that I think was very popular at one time.
I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, I think it was called North and South, if I had to guess, because that was a big movie. So I don't know. Either way. Number 6. What is our number 6 game of all time for the DOS, beating out SimCity 2000 by 8 points?
I'm going to say Command and Conquer. It has to be in here. I feel like it has to be in here somewhere.
I'm going to say something that sounds like that, but then changes. Commander Keen.
Ah, yes.
Both good choices. Both incorrect. At number 6, Duke Nukem 3D.
Okay.
That's where Duke is. All right.
This is a funny one. It's also quite impressive, kind of like Quake was, because it's Doom-esque. It's still got those sprites, but it's sort of a bit more in a 3D world. It had that edge, though, that very 90s edge.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to, when you play it, you have to adapt a 90s mindset, because there's a lot of stuff that's of its time in there. I still think it's really fun.
Yeah.
But there's definitely, like, you definitely have to switch your mind into a different place.
Yeah.
Like,
it's check out these women. You can pee anywhere. That sort of stuff.
Yeah. It's like you hand a dollar bill to a stripper and she flashes you. Like that's a game mechanic that's in Duke Nukem. You recover health for peeing. Yeah. It's sort of a kind with Conker's Fur Day, a bad Fur Day a little bit, like in the sense of like it's this very edgy, but in an extremely like sort of 12-year-old kind of way, right? Like it's edgy, but there's a limit to how edgy it can think to be.
it's really funny because Duke had all these lines, these like classic lines that I thought originated with Duke, and then I find out later it's like, oh no, they're just pulling from movies.
Oh yeah.
I'm here to kick ass and chew bubble gum.
Yeah. Yeah. You think Duke Nukem when you hear that line, but it's actually from a movie.
Yeah, it's John Carpenter.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, Duke isn't really that original. I
No.
played other Duke games on others, like there's like a third person one on PS1 or something like that. But I never really played a lot of Duke Nukem 3D, but I remember being absolutely shocked because I never realized Duke Nukem 3D was the third game. I always thought it was where Duke Nukem began.
Yeah.
But there are two other Duke Nukem games that are side scrollers in the vein of, well, Commander Keen.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember playing
weird.
those occasionally, and it's a big shift. Like you can tell that it's like a pre and post Doom sort of world that those games exist in. Because the original Duke Nukems were these very sort of over-the-top pastiches of 80s action movie tropes. And then Duke Nukem 3D sort of takes it into the 90s with like this sort of Gen X, like irreverent, ironic, I don't care about anything kind of... Like there's definitely a shift in the humor that comes with it there. That didn't really age very well, but it did give us Duke Nukem Forever, which ended up, as everyone knows, being the greatest game of all time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like all the secrets in Duke Nukem 3D are cool, like finding
yes,
just like you just press a random wall and it opens up into somewhere else. There's a lot of attention to detail in these levels, and there's stuff that some players just may never see, and that's stuff you don't really see that much these days. Like developers don't want you missing big areas, but Duke Nukem 3D is full of that stuff.
It's an impressive level of interaction. True. I think it's a lot of it's immature, but you are interacting with the world way more than most other games at the time.
Yeah. And that's like, again, like drawing these lines between things is like Duke Nukem 3D helped pioneer an approach to 3D level design. Because like that's also, you have to remember, that's something that's being invented in this time. How do you design a game level in 3D? Doom didn't have like the ability to jump, for example. Duke Nukem had a jetpack where you could fly around. That was a huge deal, that you have a jetpack and you could fly over stuff. Holy crap. Like, whoa. That was a big deal back then, right? Like, along with games like Descent, like sort of pioneering, how do you navigate a 3D space? How do you map it? How do you make it legible for a player? Go this way. And you can see a lot of the level design things that we are used to in modern games with like, oh, there's a light over that door. I need to go through that door. Duke Nukem 3D is beginning to invent these little things of like guiding the player along, telling them here's something to be interested in. Here's a wall that looks a little different. Maybe throw a bomb at it, right? Like that. Those things exist there. The history of that level design discipline begins with games like Doom and Duke Nukem 3D.
Very much so. Yeah. So I think it's fitting for a top 10. I think so. Well, let's get to that top 5. Beating out Duke Nukem by 20 points. What is our number 5 game of all time for the DOS? As I said, you've mentioned everyone. You've mentioned by name every game that's remaining at some point.
I'm bringing Lemmings back. It deserves to be here, and I'll be so mad if it isn't.
I'll say Secret of Monkey Island.
Okay. At number 5. John is correct.
Hell yeah.
Lemmings. Oh, I'm really glad Lemmings gets to be on the list.
Lemmings is just timeless. Sony own Lemmings now. It's their first-party PlayStation franchise because they bought Psyonix.
They own? Oh, really? How the hell did they get it?
They bought the studio who made Wipeout, who previously made Lemmings, and then they closed them down.
Oh,
so it's just it's their IP, but they don't use it. But no, Lemmings is just timeless. It was on PSP and PS2. I think those like the last versions. Vita may have had one. But it's just you solve these puzzles. Every one of your soldiers, like you can use them as a barrier, or you can go straight to the exit. Like you can make them explode, you can make them climb walls, make them dig. It's that perfect mix of PC strategy with sort of like an arcadey nature. I think Lemmings rules.
Yeah, and a little bit of that anarchic sort of like, hey, you can blow your lemmings up, and that's a valid tool to help you. Like that little bit of that edge of like, hey, lemmings dying, throwing themselves over cliffs, suicide. Like a little bit of that '90s edge humor.
Splat they have if they go full too far.
Yeah, you should give them like parachutes one by one.
Mm.
Yeah.
I only played Lemmings off the Super Nintendo. Never played any of the PC versions, but I imagine they're all pretty similar. I mean,
Yeah.
Lemmings is Lemmings. Like it's you don't really get any more complex. It is just here's a set of guys that you got to get to the exit, and here's the tools you have in order to do that. And it's been done a lot for a lot of other games. It's highly influential. It's basically where Mario and Donkey Kong went eventually with the minis.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true. Like Mario and Donkey Kong with the minis. I didn't even think about. Yeah, that is a Lemmings inspired thing, isn't it? Damn.
Yeah.
I was gonna mention there was a game Humanity, I think it was called, which
yes,
is like a more
by
recent.
Enhanced.
Yeah, by Enhanced. Like that takes a lot after Lemmings in the sense of like it's
Very
about
much.
managing this crowd of things that just move, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it's wonderful. The Lemmings, there's been a lot of different versions, but it's always been as good as it's been. They've been like very iterative. So like going back to DOS Lemmings, yes, it's still great.
Terry in chat says, wondering if we're going to see Lemmings in an Astrobot level one of these days.
I
God,
hope
that
so.
would be very, very funny.
How? Lemmings better be one of the DLC bots, or else we got a rage. I'm afraid.
You could build a level around that, like having a bunch of little Astrobots. You have to protect them or guide them. Like, there's a level mechanic in there, surely.
The one other thing before we move on that a lot of people I think forget over time is it might have been published by Psygnosis. It was developed by DMA Design, who would go on to do Grand Theft Auto 1, 2, 3, all that. Like, it's weird to see the origin point.
Wow.
So yeah, but yeah, they're number 5, Lemmings. So, all right, John Skyen, what is the number 4 game of all time for DOS?
So we've said them all by name at some point. So we've said Monkey Island, we've said Wolfenstein, we've said Doom. What else?
I'll say, yeah. I said Zork, but I feel like I doubt it. At this point, one thing we haven't mentioned, and I'm surprised this apparently isn't on the list, Warcraft.
Oh.
Was a DOS game back in the day.
Warcraft 2 was as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh. But we didn't mention that, so what the heck? Dune 2, I guess I'll say?
We have mentioned Math Blaster.
Ooh, I mean, that's the thing. I was thinking of, like, did Oregon Trail ever come out for DOS, right? Because I figured that could be a popular one, even if it's not, But I'm going to stick with Dune 2, because I think I mentioned it at some point.
Yeah. My heart says Wolfenstein, but my mind is saying Maths Blaster, so we're going with Math Blaster.
At number 4, John, you should have stuck with your heart. Wolfenstein 3D.
Wolfenstein.
Beating out Lemmings by about 18 points.
Yeah, I mean this is where it really started. Doom gets the credit, but Wolfenstein's where it really started. And it's another one that's still great today. It's when you shoot a Nazi, you're just hearing like "Mein Leben," like that's ingrained in your mind.
I remember, yeah. God, I think I remember every sound effect from that game. Like the little bit when you pick up stuff on the ground, and the sounds of the guns, and like robot Hitler yelling at you during the boss fight.
I remember the brick texture for some reason. That always stays in my mind for some reason. It's just there, and then seeing your little blast squids down at the bottom as he's making these faces as you're collecting stuff and all this. It really did have an effect. Like, it stuck with me when my cousin showed it. I'm like, oh my God, this is nuts. But you play it a little bit and it's fun. It is weird to go back to and not have to like aim. You just have to sort of point yourself in the general direction. And get a hit. But it's
because
totally
it was
feasible,
all keyboard.
Oh yeah. The thing that gets me is from a modern mindset is that it tells you like, you missed this many secrets, or it's like secret percentage 8%. I'm like, how did I miss it?
Yeah.
But you got to kind of not think about it, I think.
Yeah. Again, that thing about level design, right? The levels did not tell you where the secrets were. No indications, no hints, no nothing. Just go and press all of the walls and see.
There's that sort of labyrinthy feel to it. It's like a maze game mixed with a shooter. Like you've got
Yeah, I mean that's where it came from.
Yeah.
Like that's Wolfenstein evolved out of the maze games of that
Yeah.
period. I think there's a YouTuber called Aaron Signal who has a series called Children of Doom where he goes over the whole history of like the FPS franchise. So if anyone out there wants to know more about like the nitty gritty of all the influences that went into it, that's a good place to go.
Mhm. And you're talking about like the maze design. You're correct. I didn't even think about it, but like Duke Nukem, Wolfenstein is the third game in the series. There was Castle Wolfenstein and Beyond Castle Wolfenstein, and they were very much top-down maze games.
Yeah, isometrics. Yeah, well, like which also like here's another long line to draw. Metal Gear Solid. Like I know at some point I read that like some of Metal Gear Solid's stealth mechanics. Part of it comes from the design principles that were involved in stuff like Wolfenstein, where there were mechanics to distract guards, sneak past, steal uniforms, things like that, because it was all based on like World War II heroic escape from like the Nazi war camp movie like thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's is this the origin point of the first person shooter? Like, is this?
It's what popularized it at the very least. Like maybe something else did it prior, but I can't think of
I
anything.
believe there were a couple of games that did something similar prior to that. I think there was I can't remember if it came before, but like one of the Elder Scrolls games had like the same sort of first person
That's true.
environment where you shot spells around. I believe there was a spell.
Arena was the
later.
first Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
Daggerfall was second.
Yes, that's right.
I know there was one game where you play as a wizard and you're running around a labyrinth and shooting fireballs at things that came before Wolfenstein 3D. And I believe its engine and its tech was part of the foundation of how they. I think it was even by id Software as well.
Okay.
Now I need to look this up. Now I'm getting annoyed that I can't remember. Because what was the?
Well, the funny thing that I think maybe has been lost to time now is that we didn't have a term for first-person shooter back then. The term that was often given is just Doom clone.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what do we call Wolfenstein? Doom.
Proto Doom clone.
Yeah, I believe at the time, like Doom was called like a Wolfenstein, like at some point or another, like because that again, that's another thing about looking into the deep past, right? Like genres didn't exist yet back then. Like the idea of something being a point and click adventure is like no, like they were called adventure games because they were often sold as like this is an adventure you can play on your PC, right? Drawing on the language of like choose your own adventure books, basically. That's why they're called adventure games, even though like jumping and running and shooting in like a Nathan Drake game is more of an adventure than click drag rubber chicken to sleeping man, right?
Yeah, very much so. But yeah, I mean, hard to argue against the grandfather of it all, really. So, well, let's get to that top 3. What is number 3 of our top 10 DOS games of all time?
Here's a question. We've not had Monkey Island. We've not had Doom. And I'm thinking like that's 2. Is there a chance that both Dooms are here? Doom 1 and Doom 2?
Yeah, that was going to be my guess. I was going to say Doom 2 was going to be down here. Because it is just kind of more Doom, and it's not as beloved as Doom 1 is. So I would put Doom 2 down here, would be my guess anyway.
Okay. I agree, but I'll say Monkey Island.
Cover the bases.
One of you is going to be right. At number 3, The Secret of Monkey Island with 293 points, beating out Wolfenstein by about 40. And I mean, I've gone back and played this. It's really fun. Like that scum system does change a lot, and the humor is on point.
Yeah.
Like even to this day.
And this is what I think of when I think just point and click games. To this very day, this is just the icon of the genre. It's still brilliant, and everything's still influenced by it. Like you look at a game like Locomotive, which came out late last year. It's another point and click, and it's just full of Monkey Island influence, even though it came out like 30 years later. Because it's just they perfected it. They just did it right the first time.
Yeah, it's also influential in the sense that like those games helped invent the concept of games writing.
Yeah.
right? Like that games could have a story and tell a story that wasn't just point gun at man, click bang bang, right? Or bounce ball back and forth between thing. Like the idea of games writing as a discipline, as a thing that could have literary ambitions, right? Like to tell a story that isn't just a bunch of jokes or whatever. That Monkey Island helped build the idea of storytelling in games. And it's still funny. Like even now, you can play Monkey Island, and if you've never played it before, there's going to be a couple of the jokes that'll get you.
Yeah.
Like, which is an incredible testament to like the quality of writing that's in that game.
Seriously. And it's interesting too, because there's a collection aspect. Like you got to gather your insult sword fighting in order to be able to progress at some point. But it's also interesting in that way, is like what responds to what, and you'll never get stuck, but you'll take a while to figure out certain things. Like this is very much use rubber chicken on sleeping man and somehow get item C. It is the origin of use every item on everything. It really feels like, and certainly the more silly aspects. Maniac Mansion, of course, could be even more.
It's a water cooler game in that way. Like people would get together and swap. Like I figured out how to do the thing. Like you have to go and take the thing. Like I remember people swapping stories about that kind of thing, of like figuring out the solution. And like we used to have games magazines, right? Like that would come out after the game a little while, and here's the solution to the puzzle in the thing. That was something you could just publish a magazine about before the rise of game FAQs.
There was actually quite a few votes for Return to Monkey Island, which
yes,
is the most recent one. So that's how timeless it is. I was like, that's definitely not on DOS, but it's. I like that Monkey Island has gotten to continue. My first experience with Monkey Island was actually on the PlayStation 2 with oh god, this is a 3D one. It was
I know which one.
Curse of Monkey Island.
I think it might be
Curse. Yeah, was it Curse?
Yeah. I remember getting to Monkey Island and then there being this maze that I could not figure out. I was with a friend. We were looking up guides, and we actively looking up guides, and we could not figure out how to get through this maze to finish it, because we just had a sleepover and we played through all of this game, well, as much as we could, and we couldn't get to that last bit, and it was just so frustrating. But play the Monkey Island games. They are a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great that it's evolved.
Escape from Monkey Island. Thank you, press play to Jason.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think everyone has their own Monkey Island, because you can play the original, and that's the one that I first was introduced to because a friend had DOS and Monkey Island. But the first one I owned were the WiiWare episodes of Monkey Island.
Oh yeah,
and those were really good too.
Again, what a longevity for a series to have all the way up into like the WiiWare era, and even like today, like you still get the re-releases. You still get people talking about it. You still get people referencing Monkey Island. As an influence on them, even people like who weren't born when the damn game came out.
Uncharted has the fourth game has that reference to Guybrush. He's one of the pirates that you see built up. So it is just firmly established, and you can't go against that kind of legacy. It's just impressive, genre defining, or just really part of that genre. All right. What is our number 2 game of all time?
So we have two slots, and it's likely Doom or Doom 2, but do we want to guess something else?
Yeah, what else have we meant? Like,
you've mentioned
I'll say Math
Jack
Blaster
Rabbit a few times. It might be that.
Like, I'll say Math Blaster for this one, because like I feel like an edutainment game would make sense on the list somewhere.
Okay. I'll play it safe with Doom 2, but I want it to be Math Blaster.
It'd be funny if it was Math Blaster, but no, it's Doom 2. About 20 points ahead of Monkey Island. That figures. Monkey Island was getting really close. I was actually kind of pulling for Monkey Island to get number 2 to get that spot, but nope. Doom 2 with 310 points, and I'm not overly familiar with this one. I know it's kind of more of the same, except with some new weapons, but I
mean, it is kind of
the super shotgun.
Yeah,
the super shotgun comes from Doom 2, right? So that's an iconic piece of the series. But I do remember, like, Doom 2 was a sequel in the vein of feeling more like an expansion.
Exactly, and Doom 1 already had expansions. Like there was more to Doom 1 already. So like, they gave us bigger scope with Doom 2. The maps were larger. They were more set on Earth rather than just the space station. Like it got a bit more ambitious.
Yeah.
Personally speaking, I prefer the smallness of the first Doom. I prefer the scope being a bit more focused. But no, Doom 2 is still an incredible game, though.
Yeah, it is, and part of the reason why Doom 3 was what it was is because there was the studio had a little bit of that backlash from Doom 2 being just more of the same. That okay, Doom 3 needs to be something. It needs to be something special. So they have the lighting system and like all of it's creepy now, and it's kind of a horror game more than an action game. That partly, as I recall, came out of like there being a little bit of a consumer backlash against Doom 2 of just being, well, it's more of the same. It's more of what you could have released as a level pack, kind of. Yeah. And then you get like Doom, like the 26, the one before Doom Eternal.
Yeah, 2016.
Was it just called Doom?
2016, yeah.
2016, yeah. Which was very much billed as like a return to form, right? Like we're going back to the roots of the Doom franchise. That like Doom 2 is a big part of like the series sort of taking that little swerve into horror and then having to find its way back to just being a boomer shooter, as we're calling them nowadays.
I mean, it's hard to deny it is just fun to tear through demons, and the legacy they built up for Doom Guy in 2016 and beyond. Like I've not played Eternal yet or not, but the fact that these demons fear this man after the first 2 Dooms and now all of the Doom 2016, it really does. It is a power fantasy through and through, and you feel that power through these weapons. Super shotgun, absolutely being one of the cases. But you also, like, I remember this. Doom is frequently really cheap, so I picked it up for like $1 on the Switch and played a little bit of Doom 2 and got my ass handed to me. This game is hard.
Yeah, Doom 2
it is. It's a tough one. It was made with the expectation that people playing Doom 2 would have completed or played a lot of Doom 1 at the very least, right? Like it was made the expectation. It's kind of a little bit like Super Mario Brothers 2 in that respect. It's a game made with the expectation that people have played the first one.
It does belong here, though, I feel.
Yes.
I would have rather seen something else for variety's sake, but if we're just taking everybody's votes, I think Doom 2 makes so much sense. Doom, I think, is rightfully the tighter game, but Doom 2 is still a lot of fun. It's very ambitious. And it stands the test of time. Like there's the re-releases of Doom 1 and 2 today, and they're still like it's not just historically they're good. They just are legitimately still some of the best shooters you can play.
You can jump in here and have fun, and it's a classic. I mean, it's hard, but it's a classic, and it is timeless
design.
Yeah, very much so. There's a reason that first-person shooters got labeled Doom clones because this was the defining moment.
There's a time before Doom and there's a time after. You can really split the timeline down. Doom specifically as the inflection point.
That's how we measure the calendar from now on. The release of Doom, after that's just year 1, year 2.
Yeah.
Before
Easy
Doom.
enough. Well, let's go ahead and do you have a guess at what number 1 might be?
Oh, Jazz Jackrabbit, obviously.
Blaster.
You're both correct, as you both thought. Number 1, the greatest game of all time for the DOS and the calculator and your smartwatch and the Switch and everything that you can think of to port this damn thing to.
Pregnancy tests and microwaves, yes.
Pregnancy tests, microwaves, exactly. Doom, not even a competition. As I said, Doom 2 with 310 points. The original Doom, 890 points. Commanding from everything else. Again, these are points split across 350 different games among 200 votes. The fact that it got 890 is a domination effect. Like Doom is DOS.
Yeah, there was no other option. It was always going to be Doom. And like you're saying about Doom 2, it's still masterful. Like you've got to get into the mindset of you're not really aiming. Whatever you're looking at is kind of what you're shooting at. You're not actually aiming your gun at something. It's a keyboard game, not really a mouse game. Once you understand that, though, Doom is still just flawless. It's just so fun to run through, whether you're speedrunning or whether you're checking every nook and cranny trying to find secrets. It's just always fun. And there's that progression too. Like you start with the pistol, you get the shotgun, you just keep getting like mightier and mightier. And so do the enemies, but you can just sort of tear them down. It's that power feeling which just keeps building and building and building.
It is as game design. Like there's a reason there's 100 million video essays about this game on YouTube and its game design and its influence, and because it is one of those games that you can still just you can just pick it up. You can show it to anyone who's ever touched a controller, or you'll have to instruct them on how to use the keyboard, but people can figure it out. It's like, it's so basic, so primal, it's so universal. It's such a perfect power fantasy. Also because like it manages that difficult balance of like, you are incredibly powerful, you can take down anything, you can shoot anyone. Oops, you made one mistake and now you're scrambling for a health pack, right? And the exhilarating moments that come out of that, right? Of like just barely scraping by. And that's what makes these secrets so exciting, is because when you know, oh, I can get the shotgun early, I can find this weapon earlier and use that to clear out. It makes you feel so powerful. It was so great for like playground rumors and like telling people like, yeah, I'm over here, I can do this and can do that. There was a social aspect to Doom that also, like, this is another thing. Speedrunning is in many ways a thing that like originates in part with Doom and like these custom maps and people speedrunning Doom maps. Modding scenes grew out of Doom. Like now still people make Doom mods, and like there's a Sonic fan game that's built in the Doom engine, which is amazing. It's fantastic. You would never be able to tell, but it's built on a conversion of that same engine. The influence of Doom just can't be overstated on the history of gaming. No. Or indeed the cultural history, because it was one of the games that was part of like the sort of like, ooh, games are dangerous and they're making children violent. Like, it towers over every aspect of conversation about the games industry.
It was one of those just osmosis. Like if you were in gaming, even if you haven't touched Doom, parts of it just came into you through osmosis. Just like I wasn't watching scary movies as a young kid. I knew who Freddy was, I knew who Jason was, and I knew what the BFG was. Mm-hmm. So
from a Wolfenstein evolution standpoint too, that game was very much, you're going through these mazes, you're shooting. There's like a little bit of rigidness to the movement, whereas Doom, I feel like just kind of perfected it all. It felt super smooth now, and enemies were choreographed in a great way too. In pretty much any modern shooter, enemies just shoot at you, like bullets are instant. But in Doom, like you've got like fireballs that come towards you, and you've got to use your 3D space to avoid them. Like it's taking into account its actual medium within the gameplay. Everything is avoidable. So even though you can be killed in like 1 or 2 hits, you are fully you fully have the utensils to avoid anything.
Yeah. There's also, you don't think about it, but there's verticality to Doom.
Yes.
That Wolfenstein 3D absolutely did not have. It is flat with Wolfenstein, but Doom, you going up ladders, you can see like far off places, which again makes it a little odd. The fact is like, oh, this guy's up there to the right, and I can just generally shoot in his direction, the bullets will hit.
Yeah,
but,
even though you're aiming like a wall, but it's just going to magically get to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of aim assist was necessary.
A little bit for the time, lacking a mouse and God forbid trying to aim with a keyboard. But yeah, it's just fun. It's again hard. You want to use those save states, but there's just something naturally fun about blasting through all these demons.
Yeah. I think we generally think single player thinking Doom now, but like multiplayer is a huge part of Doom's legacy as well.
Yes,
and that's a little bit lost today. Because like when you think about like, Doom 2016 and Eternal, multiplayer does not even come to mind. Eternal barely even has it. But the original Doom, that's something that went on not just in its release year, not just in that decade, forever. People still play Doom multiplayer, and there's a huge reason for that. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, and like it's the influences of Doom like track into like the wildest things, because like Unreal was a shooter game that came out, like a lot of it was built around reaction to and like sort of trying to interpolate Doom into a more ambitious sort of storytelling format. Unreal eventually spawns the Unreal Engine, eventually spawns like half the games industry, right? Like the lines you can draw back to Doom as like an inflection point for development in what games communities became, what like games culture became, what games development became. It's everywhere. There's no game in the modern day that does not draw some line somewhere back to Doom as an inflection point. It is industry defining in the purest sense of the word. Absolutely.
So it's a big reason I wanted to cover DOS, because I wanted to make sure Doom was in the conversation. It deserved it, because I did the 80s PCs like, wait a second, I don't know if 90s PC covers DOS and Windows, and I think there's a lot of stuff that will be shifted out if we don't cover DOS individually as well. So that's why I wanted to make sure DOS was in the conversation, because there are games exclusive for it. Obviously, we've seen some that are also on Windows, but there's some exclusives on there that are well worth talking about. And I think we ended up with a pretty solid top 10.
Absolutely. A lot of variety in there. And a lot of stuff. I think if you were to judge modern day PC, there'd be a lot of stuff that's also on console. Whereas this, it's
Yes.
pretty much just strictly stuff that was made just for DOS.
Yeah. Like always, though, I do want to cover some of the games that did not make it. And I think this is where Skyen's going to be really interested to see.
Yes. What else did people even put in?
A lot. So we'll cover the top 50 once again, just to break it down real quick. At 11, the Oregon Trail missed out the top 10 by 9 points. However, Oregon Trail did make the top 10 of the 80s PC, so I'm not too upset because I do think Oregon Trail deserves to be in there. Biased because I definitely played the hell of it as in school. But
edutainment is also an important part of like games history in that sense, because that was again, computers were originally conceived as these are work machines upon which you do like serious labor work up, math and writing things down and stuff like that. And edutainment games sort of came along as this little thin end of the wedge into computers to say like, yes, but what if children could have fun while also learning and then play video games as well? And that a lot of people got introduced to gaming that way. And also it's another one of those things of like, as more and more software sort of realized the utility of making an interface engaging just to engage with, right? Like of having these little stories. I remember Windows had a very ill-fated launch of an operating system where when you get the origins of stuff like Clippy, for example, like these little sort of cutesy graphical interface things that are meant to make it more fun and accessible for people to interact with computers. Part of that came out of like the understanding that developed from gaming, from edutainment, that if you make it a little bit fun, if you tell a little bit of a story, if you put a character in there, it's a lot easier to get like Janet, mother of 3, who's never touched a computer in her life before, to understand this thing as a product and want to engage with it. The friendliness of the skeuomorphism partly comes out of games like Oregon Trail and like edutainment software in general.
Yeah, I never thought Oregon Trail was an education game when I played it. I just like, I get to go hunting, that type of thing, or try to survive the fjording.
That's the most American thing you've said. Like,
no, exactly.
Education.
That was where the gameplay is. And here comes an animal, shoot it, and you're like, okay, I got all these. I killed half this forest. You can only harvest 60 pounds of meat. Oh. Whoops. But it's a kid thing to do, especially American kids. But anyway, I just revealed myself. Let's go to number 12 was the original Fallout.
Nice.
Ooh, I was wondering where that was going to be, because the original Fallout was DOS first. Mm-hmm. And then Fallout 2, I think, was Windows 95 or 3.1, one of them.
Yeah. Number 13, Command & Conquer Red Alert. Personal favorite of mine.
Above Command & Conquer itself. Interesting.
Yeah. Number 14, Warcraft 2.
That's surprising. I thought that would be way...
Yeah, I would have thought that Warcraft would be way up there.
I think the origins of Warcraft have kind of been lost to time because
you
didn't have a great port of Warcraft 3 and 1 and 2. I think Warcraft 3 wasn't that Windows only.
I think Warcraft 3 was, yeah.
Yeah, and then 1 and 2 are not as remembered and definitely haven't been re-released. So I think I've noticed that a fading of memory. If something has been re-released a bit more, people have a more chance to play it or remember it, and then that helps it quite a bit. And the same way, you were guessing this one quite a bit, Skyen. 15, Jazz Jackrabbit.
There he is. Yeah, because I remember that one as being like not that PC ever really had a gaming mascot in the same way that the consoles did, but there was a time when like Jazz Jackrabbit from Epic Games was like, they were sort of pitching him as like an answer to the Marios, to the Sonics of the world. Like he's this critter with attitude, right? Like a very, very product of the 90s kind of thing. And I remember that game being very big with the few people, like with the people that I knew who were kids who were playing video games on PC. It was Jazz Jackrabbit because it was simple platformer shooter kind of situation.
Yeah, very much so. At number 16, XCOM UFO Defense.
Oh yeah, XCOM.
So
Oh yeah.
got to get that original in there. I remember that. I've heard that is extremely tough as well. At 17, Prince of Persia, which we saw during 80s PC, and I think got in the top for 80s PC.
Yeah,
So
it did.
glad we got some representation there. At 18, the original Sim City, which makes sense.
Makes sense.
19, Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge. At 20, the original Worms.
Oh yeah, Worms.
I played that.
Another one of those I
Worms
was
Armageddon.
wondering if it was going to show up ever, because like I remember also Worms being one of those, like you'd hot seat it at the computer lab at school and take turns blowing each other up with like banana bombs and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I
got that holy hand grenade and
I
all that.
associated Worms with like early Windows, but I guess it was around DOS time.
It was a DOS, the first one. Worms 2 was Windows only, I think. And that was the one that became the bigger deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've only ever played Worms Armageddon, but I love Worms Armageddon. 21, Commander Keen, an Invasion of the Vorticons.
It's good that it's here somewhere.
That's its software, by the way. That's a predecessor. Like that's what John Carmack and Romero were up to before they made Doom.
Yeah.
And you can find, I believe, Commander Keen's corpse in one of the Doom games.
I think so. I think I've heard that. Let's see. 22, Sam and Max Hit the Road, which I've never played
Another
myself.
LucasArts.
Yep. Never played it myself, but I watched the Sam and Max cartoon on Fox when I was a kid, and I love that thing.
Yeah, it's still funny, by the way. If anyone wants to play it, you can still play it. It's still funny.
Oh, yeah. 23, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis.
There he is. Another game I remember my mom playing specifically. Like
Is it an adventure
classic
game?
point and click. Yeah.
Okay.
Point and click adventure.
Number 24, Theme Hospital.
I thought Theme Hospital would be here somewhere. I was thinking.
I'm not familiar with this one at all.
I thought it might be closer to the top 10, to be honest.
Yeah, 2 Point Hospital is basically a sort of modern remake of Theme Hospital. Like it's basically the same game. Management sim, like something Bullfrog did a bunch. Theme Park, which eventually inspired games like Roller Coaster Tycoon, is of the same kind.
Oh, okay. Just to have that sort of comparison point again, these are all very close, John. Like Civilization was at 168 points. Theme Hospital is at 80 points. Like there is very little difference because there's a lot of ties towards the bottom. It's just like, I remember this one game that I played as a kid and I'm going to put that down here. But you're like the only person who puts it down there type thing. Very, very common for this list. At number 25, Command and Conquer, the original.
Yes, that would be there.
At tied for 26, System Shock and Maniac Mansion.
Whoa, okay.
Oh yeah, the first System Shock was DOS, wasn't it?
That's another one where you think like that must have been Windows, but yeah, I guess it was. Yeah. These are both of these could have been in the top 10, but as you said, it's so close with the voting.
Mm-hmm.
System Shock is another one of those, like, influenced everything that came after. Like, every immersive sim, very much drawing from System Shock. Like, BioShock eventually as a sort of spiritual sequel, and then, well into basically any, like, third person, like, Avowed, which came out very recently.
Yeah.
There are game mechanics in there that, like, System Shock innovated back in your day.
Yeah. Let's see. At 28, Heroes of Might and Magic 2.
God, I lost so many hours to that game.
I've heard of that series, never touched it, but that's going to be a common theme for DOS games. Number 29, The Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall. 30 would be Transport Tycoon Deluxe. I just tossed Transport Tycoon and Deluxe together.
My favorite game of all time, going by gameplay time. That one's like, I've sunk ungodly amounts of hours. Again, your Satisfactories, your like management sim games, a lot of that draws from Transport Tycoon.
Nice.
Like formalized a lot of the visual language of those. And of course, it's by Chris Sawyer, who eventually made Roller Coaster Tycoon as well.
There you go.
How many hours do you think you're talking with that? Like, are we talking thousands?
Multiple thousands, because it was one of the only games I had when I was a kid, like I had on CD, right? That I could install on, like, whenever I got a new computer I could install, and it was a comfort game for me. I always went back to that because there's something so meditative about just here's transport the thing to the thing, make money, reinvest that money to like build a bigger network. And like if you have any like appreciation for trains, you can build transport networks that are, again, satisfactory is the comparison I come up with, because the simple signaling system that is in that game, when you're building like train signaling systems, the complexity that you can build in is Minecraft like, almost the way you can almost program a train system to just run efficiently in every direction. Like there's a lot of good brain chemicals you can get out of that.
Still going to this day with all these different games, even down to a lot of the job simulators that put out there. It's just like they find a way to tickle that part of your brain. By the way, single point differences for a lot of these games coming up. Like there's a single point difference between Daggerfall and Transport Tycoon. Another single point difference to 31 with Theme Park.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense to be.
Yeah. 32 is Blood. Don't know much about that one.
I remember seeing that in the stores and my mom wouldn't let me buy it. I don't know. I don't think I've ever played it, actually.
Oh, wow. I don't even know what type of game it is.
It's an FPS, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. I'm looking at here and it's just a bloody handprint.
Yeah.
Anyway, number 33, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
There's another edutainment. Yeah, classic one.
Yep. 34, Dungeon Keeper.
Mm-hmm.
Dungeon Keeper. Oh, God. I still remember the sound of the narrator's voice in that game.
Oh, wow.
Like, what is it called? Writing? Something. Very good. Like, another one of those games that has humor that, like, still kind of works, because it's very much a game where you're like, you play as an evil guy who's invading, like, the glorious, pretty fantasy kingdom. So you're sending all these imps and giant spiders against, like, heroic heroes from the lands above. And the narrator is so wonderfully sadistic, like, in the way that he talks.
Nice.
It's one of those games, like, it's fun to be evil kind of games.
Right.
Joyful.
That's cool. Again, you can imagine PC just getting away with that kind of stuff. 35, Star Wars TIE Fighter.
Yes.
Which my
there
friends
was like
raved about.
Yes, there was a long series. Like, this is one thing that I'm kind of surprised didn't show up in the top 10. All the flight simulators, because they're like Descent, Wing Commander, like Microsoft Flight Simulator also, but then also all of the Star Wars games. There were so many of them. There was TIE Fighter, TIE Fighter 2, X-Wing. Did they do a Y-Wing game at some point? They did a bunch of them.
I don't know if they did a Y-Wing game, but it was. I knew there was X-Wing versus TIE Fighter or something like that, but combining them all. Anyway, tied at 36, Star Wars Dark Forces and One Must Fall 2097. Tied at 38, Chips Challenge and Duke Nukem.
Oh, that's the first one I haven't heard of. Chips Challenge.
Yeah. 40, Star Wars X-Wing. Tied at 41, very interestingly, the original Tomb Raider and the original Rayman.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Is Chips Challenge only Windows? Hold on. Let me double check on that.
Chips Challenge is Windows.
It's also out on DOS. It got a port for DOS at the very least.
There's an 89 version, so it is DOS.
Yeah.
When I looked it up, it showed in 1989. So yes, it is on DOS.
As a launch title for the Atari Lynx of all things.
There's a lot of games here that are known. Like I Command Conquer Red Alert, that is a Windows game to me, but it came out on the DOS. So, but yeah, Tomb Raider and Rayman at 41. Tied at 43, Little Big Adventure 2 and King's Quest 6. Here today, gone tomorrow.
How many votes are we getting for like this scale of like in the 40s?
46.
46. Okay.
46 points. And again, Theme Hospital was at 80.
Yeah.
So that's how close these are. I'm honestly surprised King's Quest didn't put in a better showing, but there's a lot of King's Quest games that might have.
A lot of them, yeah. So the votes would have been split.
Yeah. 45. You knew it was going to be in here just considering our audience. Mario Teaches Typing.
Of course.
Yeah.
46, The Settlers 2.
Ooh, yeah, that's another old classic.
Nice. 47, the original Rogue.
Oh, okay.
The origin of
every roguelike you've ever played.
Yeah.
Yep. 48, Commander Keen in Goodbye Galaxy. And then tied for 49, so that's 49.50 technically. The Elder Scrolls Arena and King's Quest: Quest for the Crown.
Mhm.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So there's our top 50, and there are so many more.
Did
Like,
How
anyone
many
vote?
Ultima games got
Yeah.
votes? Because like that's one of those series. Ultima is another one of those incredibly influential series. Origins of so many mechanics in JRPGs nowadays came from them playing Ultima and Wizardry. But Ultima also had started in 1981, the first Ultima game. The last one came out in 2018, and there's been 30 games. There's so many.
yeah, the one that put out the best showing for Ultima, because there was one that got a few votes. The one that put out the best showing is actually Ultima Underworld: The Stygian Abyss with 21
That makes
points,
sense.
and then Ultima 7 with 17 points. However, thankfully, one of the Ultima games did get represented in the 80s PC voting. So
Drink to the Past wants to know where Math Blaster was.
Oh,
that is
yeah.
a good question. Math Blaster. It's up there. I stopped organizing at a certain point, but because they're so close. 24 points.
Not
with
enough.
Math Master.
Not enough.
So it was 9 points outside of the top 50.
Did anyone vote for Mega Man DOS?
Yes.
Yeah, someone must have, surely.
Word Bunchers was voted with 9 points. Mega Man. Let's see here. Mega Man DOS got 30 points. It almost made the top 50. It did better than Math Blaster. I think there's some jokesters out there because I recently played it. Mega Man 3 got 19 points, which is a tragedy. But Mega Man X, which actually is a good port on the DOS, with 17 points.
Bad.
So.
Any votes for Cannon Fodder at all?
Yes, Cannon Fodder got quite a few. Got a decent amount of votes. 19 points total.
It's no Mega Man.
I remember that one.
And its sequel got 3 points. So.
Oh, here's a question. How about Need for Speed?
Oh.
Yes, Need for Speed got some votes. 10 points.
Because that's another one of those I remember being one of the, do you have a computer that can run Need for Speed? If you had a computer that could really run it smoothly, it was wow, technical showcase for the future of 3D graphics and all that. Need for Speed was very much one of those back in the day. Also a very, very extremely 90s game. If you go back to it, the interface, the way it was designed, oh boy.
It's funny seeing some of these, there's got some votes for, at least or a vote for Toy Story Activity Center, that type of thing. Or here's Phantasmagoria Puzzle of Flesh. Wizardry 7 got voted on. Broken Sword got some votes. That sort of stuff. So a lot of those classics did get votes. It's just not a ton of them.
Yeah.
Full Throttle
Were there
got
any votes
25 points.
for the flight simulators? Did you get any for Microsoft's Flight Simulator series at all?
None.
Oh, interesting.
I got nothing for Microsoft Flight Simulator. That might be more associated with just Windows.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It is kind of shocking, though. I did think Broken Sword might rank higher, because there was recently a re-release of Shadow the Templar. But I guess not.
Broken Sword, 4 points for Shadow of the Templar.
Were there any votes, by the way, for Sid Meier's Colonization?
Yes, actually.
I
It got
figured.
9 points.
9 points. I would have thought it would be more, because that's genuinely, it's a historically very problematic game. But it's genuinely, I can still go back and play that and have a pretty darn good time colonizing the new world. As a 4X game, it's just very well designed. It's very, very good game design. Which I remember that as being a classic that people would will still talk about sometimes nowadays. So I'm surprised they didn't get any votes almost. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, 200 people. It's sort of a limited pool.
It's a limited pool of people. Hustlebun in chat asks about the DOS shooters Raptor, Tyrion, or Descent, and I'd like to know about Raptor especially.
Raptor got, it was close. 32 points. It just barely outside the top 50. Let's see. Tyrion got 31 points. And then Descent got 23 points.
Yeah.
And just because I happen to see it here, the origin point of the RTS genre, Dune 2 got 32 points, all tying with Raptor. So again, just barely outside of that top 50.
Yeah. It makes sense because it is such a diverse platform. And because it ran for 19 years, it's like that's the thing about DOS that still sometimes fascinates me is I can meet someone and talk who's played DOS games and they will not have heard of any of my favorite games and I won't have heard of any of their favorites because it could be so local also.
That is so evident here. Holy crap.
Yeah. They could be so local. Like there are games that like were huge in Germany, for example, but never crossed over outside of Germany. Like Eastern Europe has their own entire development scene of like DOS games that never crossed over into the West that we've never heard of, but which like are incredibly influential on like their like games industry and their traditions over there. Because these were personal computers, but you could make your own games in a way you couldn't with consoles.
Yeah. Very much so. Like it is. I've some of these games like, is that real? Like I really didn't understand.
Yeah.
Like there was a game just called Loom, and at first I thought, is that just somebody's misspelling?
No, that's a I think it was a LucasArts game actually.
Might be.
It's a point and click.
So it's while it came, it's probably some of the greatest variety. The only thing that the only thing that has more variety on its system is the PlayStation 1, and that got far more votes than this did. So I think that just sort of goes to the strength of the DOS platform, and I'm glad we covered it. It's a fascinating little piece of history.
Yeah, for sure.
Leisure Suit Larry did get some votes. Love for Sale got 11. Land of the Lounge Lizards got 7, and Passionate Patty in Pursuit of the Pulse Sending Pictorials got 3.
I used to see the boxes for that series everywhere. Never played it myself, but there was always like in supermarket shelves or just in any shop. Leisure Suit Larry just turned his head.
Yeah, it was another one of those like you can't do this on consoles, right? Like it's one of those adult games of like children should not be allowed to play this. Like which is another thing again that the DOS platform had was it genuinely had an adult audience. Like it genuinely had an install base of adults who didn't think of what they were playing as games in the same way that kids were playing Mario. Right? They thought of it as like, this is a piece of software that I use to relax or whatever, but they didn't think of it as games or themselves as gamers. It was just, oh, here's a storybook that I'm playing called King's Quest, where I'm figuring out the story of this young boy who's becoming king. So there was like this whole generation of mom and dad gamers who would never identify as such, but like where sometimes you'll meet someone who's like in their 60s who can still to this day do a perfect run through a King's Quest game, like without looking up a tutorial because they remember.
Yeah, I see that with Danny of Game Grumps whenever he played an adventure game like those from his childhood. He remembers how to solve those things. Like once you learn it, you do not forget it just because you've worked at it for how long. Before we end off though, I saw one on here that I know people are going to ask about, so I'm just going to pop it out there. Chex Quest, 7 points.
Oh yeah.
But that is our top 10 for the MS-DOS platform. Thank you all so much for being here for our discussion. Bit of a longer one, but I love getting the history from Skyen. And Skyen, where can everybody find you at?
You can find me as TBSkyen pretty much everywhere except Twitter.
Fair enough. So,
and thank you all for inviting me on, by the way. This was fun. I remembered more about DOS games than I thought I did.
I'm glad you were here because I'm familiar with a bunch of them, but there's also some which I don't know.
We would have been fine for the top 10, I feel, but beyond that, we'd be like, I don't know. But thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/GVGaming. But even just subscribing to the channel and ringing that bell helps us a ton. So until next time, where we'll be talking about the 80s arcade games, going back to the 80s for a little bit. So until next time, bye.